Hey guys, tonight we walk into a city carved from dust, where bricks are still warm with forgotten prayers, and somewhere beyond the riverbank, the moon gleams on stone walls taller than you can imagine. You're standing in Uruk, ancient, proud, loud, and even in the glow of torchlight, the shadows feel historic. The smell? A cocktail of clay, sweat, barley beer, and goat. You're not in Kansas anymore. Actually, you're not even on any modern map. This is where it all starts. The legend, the confusion, the monster fights, and the bull. Oh yes, the bull. But before you charge into that madness, you need to meet the man behind the epic. Though calling him just a man might be underselling things a bit. Gilgamesh is carved from ambition and adrenaline. Tall enough to make you crane your neck. Strong enough to offend physics. And possibly made up. Or not. Depends who you ask. Either way, you probably won't survive this story. But hey, it's bedtime, not judgment day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it there? Now ease back. Maybe crack a window for that cool breeze or wrap yourself in your softest blanket. Let the dark settle around you. Take a breath and follow me back. You step off a merchant boat and into Uruk, sometime around 2700 BCE. The air is thick with heat and the buzz of thousands, yes thousands, of people packed into a city with walls so wide you could race chariots across the top. And someone did, probably shirtless. You catch your reflection in a puddle beside the ziggurat of Anu. Temple priests bustle past in dyed wool, carrying jars of incense that smell like spicy regret. The city is alive. Stone, sweat, and sorcery. People shout in Sumerian, haggle over dates, and argue about whose god controls the river's next flood. Spoiler, it's always a different god. This place isn't just a city, it's the city, at least in its own mind. Uruk has marketplaces, irrigation canals, even a kind of proto-bureaucracy. And right at the heart of it all, a guy who might punch you for blinking wrong, Gilgamesh. King, warrior, builder, legend. Men want to be him, women want him to maybe chill a little. Just a little. Now here's the twist. Gilgamesh wasn't entirely mortal. According to myth, he's 2/3 divine, 1/3 human. How that fraction works genetically. Historians still argue whether the math is metaphor or just Mesopotamian creative license. Either way, he acts like he owns the place. And technically, he does. But being king isn't enough for him. Gilgamesh wants to be eternal, a name whispered for eons. So he builds massive city walls, pens poetry between wars, and declares that Uruk will outlive the gods themselves. Ambitious, right? The problem? No one told him he was also kind of a jerk. He's the kind of king who interrupts your wedding to borrow the bride. The kind who challenges temple champions to arm wrestling before breakfast. The kind of guy who flexes at funerals. His people, not thrilled, so they pray, loudly, desperately, to the gods, to the spirits, to anyone who might listen through the cloud of incense and existential dread. They want balance. They want someone or something to deal with Gilgamesh's ego. Meanwhile, Gilgamesh strolls through Uruk like he's wearing the sun. Bronze glints on his arms. He tests the sharpness of his axe by casually slicing pomegranates out of midair. He misses sometimes. Those bits stain the stone for weeks. You watch as he surveys his city from the top of the temple tower, eyes burning with legacy. He's looking for a new challenge, a new story. Behind him, priests mutter. Scribes scratch cuneiform into wet clay, etching Gilgamesh's feats into history or propaganda. Here's a fun tidbit. Clay tablets last longer than paper, so some of Gilgamesh's story literally outlived empires. And we only dug it back up about 150 years ago in Nineveh, buried in a royal library like a forgotten mixtape. But let's keep walking. You pass women weaving in courtyards, their hands fast, their conversations faster. You see kids pretending to be gods with painted mud masks. One shouts, "I am Gilgamesh," and kicks over a jar. No one laughs. In a smoky tavern near the city wall, you hear an old farmer tell a story. They say our king once fought a lion barehanded. He mutters, chewing dates with half his teeth. dragged it through the streets like a parade float, poured beer on the corpse, told the moon to blink. You raise an eyebrow. Truth? Exaggeration? No one knows. Gilgamesh's legend lives in the gaps between myth and memory, between fact and flat-out flex. And here's a real historical nugget. There was a King Gilgamesh, or at least someone by that name, mentioned on a Sumerian king's list. Probably ruled Uruk around 2700 BCE. Was he divine? Probably not. Did he write poetry? Maybe. Did he fight a supernatural bull? Well, we're getting there. But first, something weirder. You're walking past the Ishtar temple when a sudden gust of hot wind hits your face. Not natural. The priests are performing something. You peek in cautiously. Candles flicker. A high priestess murmurs to a statue, draped in gold leaf and old secrets. They're asking the goddess to bring balance back to Uruk. Not through mercy, through competition. And that's when you feel it, the pause before something changes. The myth before the twist. Because if Gilgamesh is the problem, then someone's about to be the solution. The gods are listening, and they don't just answer prayers. Sometimes they throw curveballs, hairy ones, but that's next time. Right now, as twilight deepens over Uruk, you step back and watch the torches along the wall flicker into life. Gilgamesh still stands on the tower, lit from behind like a bronze statue come to life. His jaw clenches. He's thinking about something, fame, maybe, or fear, or just whether he can throw a spear all the way to the river. You smell dust and date wine. You hear drums from the temple and laughter from the marketplace. You feel the weight of legend settling in your bones. The story's moving. You're in it now. You wake up, figuratively speaking, with the scent of ash, barley bread, and ambition floating in your nose. The streets of Uruk are louder now. There's shouting near the marketplace and, oh look, someone's being hoisted over a merchant's stall for stealing a sandal. Again, but that's background noise, because this morning Gilgamesh has declared a wrestling match. Not with someone, with everyone. You follow the sound of cheers and the occasional thud to the city square. And there he is, bronzed, bare-chested, and way too awake for this early. Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, is currently supplexing a palace guard in front of an enthusiastic crowd. He's not angry. In fact, he's grinning. The guard is less thrilled. The man is a walking paradox. A king who acts like a street brawler, a warrior who dabbles in poetry, and a demigod who still seems to be proving something to everyone, including himself. And that's the thing, isn't it? If you're two-thirds divine, shouldn't you have it figured out by now? The myths say his mother was Nin's son, a minor goddess known for wisdom, dreams, and possibly turning into a cow. Don't ask. His father, a mortal king named Lugalbanda, who may or may not have been a warrior poet with a side hustle in divine visions. Gilgamesh is their legacy, but also something else entirely. The stories never let you forget the fraction. 2 parts God, 1 part human. It's the human bit that causes all the trouble. You slip through the crowd as Gilgamesh takes a break. A priest fans him with palm fronds. A young girl nervously offers him pomegranate seeds. He eats one, spits out the rest, and suddenly declares, "I will build a tower taller than the sky." Everyone claps. No one really knows what that means. Here's a fun historical fact for your mental satchel. Mesopotamian kings were known for outrageous building projects. Think ziggurats, canals, temple complexes. They weren't just about comfort. They were declarations of power and cosmic legitimacy. Look at my mud brick skyscraper and weep, basically. And Gilgamesh? He takes that to another level. His walls around Uruk, spoiler alert, were so famous that they get more praise than any of his monster kills in the actual Epic of Gilgamesh. When a scribe says, "Go see his walls," he means it. The pride of Uruk isn't just blood and biceps. It's architecture, but people still hate him. Not everyone, to be fair. There are admirers. Younger warriors model their hair after his. Foreign traders bring him tiny carved lions as tribute. But the average Urukite? They're tired. The king parties too hard, wrestles too loud, and sleeps with, well, everyone, including brides on their wedding night. That's right, before the husbands get a chance. It's called just Primi Noctis, and while modern historians still argue whether Mesopotamian kings actually had that right or whether it's just poetic slander, either way, Gilgamesh is doing it. Which is why the priests are getting twitchy. You duck behind a reed screen as a meeting unfolds in the Temple of Anu. A high priest, 2 temple scribes, and an old woman with sharp eyes and sharper opinions. They're arguing, of course. If the gods made him, the priest says, they can unmake him. But how? A scribe whispers, he's a demigod. You want to poison him? No, says the woman. You balance fire with fire. And that's how the gods get their idea. They don't strike Gilgamesh down. They don't smite Uruk with fire or flood. They send him a rival, an equal, a counterweight in fur. Somewhere out beyond the farthest field, a man is being shaped. Not born, shaped, crafted from clay and wildness. Hairy as a goat, free as a sandstorm, strong as a river. His name is Enkidu, and he's about to crash this myth like a sweaty meteor. But we're not there yet. Back in Uruk, Gilgamesh is pacing again. He's bored. He's done rebuilding the palace atrium for the 5th time. No war to fight, no real beast to slay. And the priests? They're avoiding him. So he throws his spear into the Euphrates and challenges it to a rematch. Yes, really. You decide to follow him for the afternoon. He walks the edge of the city walls, staring out toward the distant horizon, toward lands he hasn't conquered yet. There's an ache in his eyes, something low and restless. You'd almost feel sorry for him if he hadn't punched a merchant for coughing during his bath the day before. Then he says something that surprises you. I keep dreaming of a star falling, bright, burning. It lands beside me. You blink. That's poetic? Dreams are important in Mesopotamian myths. They're not just brain static, they're warnings, prophecies, coded godmail. Gilgamesh's dreams show up often in the epic, and his mother Ninsun acts as his part-time dream interpreter. Very convenient, almost like a celestial Google Translate. She shows up now, emerging from the temple draped in linen and mystery. Your star, she says, is a companion, a friend. He will challenge you, and then save you. Gilgamesh scoffs, which is his default response to everything that isn't applause. But something in him shifts. He doesn't like being challenged. But he's lonely, deeply, terribly lonely. He may be 2/3 divine, but the 1/3 human is full of cracks. The people sense it, too. You hear it in songs hummed by children, in gossip shared over communal baths. The king dreams of stars, they whisper. He's waiting for something, and oh, it's coming. But while we're still here, lounging by the sacred canal, here's a quirky little tidbit for your brain to nibble on. Some later Mesopotamian stories describe Gilgamesh not just as a hero, but as a judge of the underworld. That's right. In death, he becomes a kind of divine DMV clerk, overseeing spirits as they shuffle into eternity. Talk about a career pivot. The sun starts to dip. Torches are being lit along the ziggurat stairs. Somewhere nearby, a camel brays like it's being emotionally blackmailed. And Gilgamesh? He's taken to carving something into the wall near the gate. You sneak closer. The script is slow, deliberate. He's writing about himself. I am Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, who measured the world with his eyes. You tilt your head. Dramatic? Sure. Arrogant? Definitely. But also kind of sad. Because why does someone so powerful need to prove he existed? Maybe that's the point. As twilight slides over the stone, you feel something shift in the wind. Like the gods have stirred. Like someone is approaching from far away. A force equal to Gilgamesh. Or maybe more. But that's tomorrow's story. Right now, Gilgamesh is alone on the parapet, watching the stars flicker into life above Uruk. One of them seems to shine brighter than the rest. A falling star, a friend, a reckoning. The moon is fat and low tonight, a pale lantern swinging over the wide plains of Sumer, casting long shadows across the salt-crusted earth. You leave the safe torchlight of Uruk behind and follow the scent of wild sage and cracked clay out into the open wild. Somewhere out here, the god's latest project is pacing barefoot through the reeds, eyes flashing like obsidian. You don't hear him at first. You feel him, a low vibration, a ripple in the ground, like someone dropped a boulder into a pool of silence. And then he's there, Enkidu. He doesn't walk so much as prowl, naked and shaggy as a lion in spring. Muscles like tree roots, hair like rain-drenched moss, and the look in his eyes, pure wilderness. Not anger, not confusion, just the alert stillness of a creature that's never been caged. He drinks from the river like a deer, then headbutts a crocodile for looking at him wrong. That's Enkidu for you. According to the myths, Enkidu lives among the animals, literally. He eats with them, runs with them, sleeps curled up beside gazelles like they're heated pillows. The people of the steppe don't know whether to worship him or throw shoes. They call him the hairy man. Not exactly flattering, but accurate. And here's your mainstream historical fact of the night. Mesopotamian folklore is full of wild men, beings from the fringe of civilization, often hairy, bestial, and sacred in a deeply uncomfortable way. They're messengers, disruptors, bridges between order and chaos. Enkidu fits the mold perfectly, but that mold's about to crack. A trapper, nameless, anxious, perpetually sweating, spots Enkidu blocking his animal traps for the 4th day in a row. This wild man, it seems, is not a fan of poaching. The trapper flees back to Uruk and stumbles into the temple courtyard, babbling about a beast who guards the beasts. Gilgamesh, of course, perks up. He's bored again. A creature strong enough to snap lion jaws? He says, grinning. Sounds like my kind of problem, but it's Nin's son who has the real idea. Send a woman, she says. Now here's a fringe fact that raises eyebrows to this day. The solution to Enkidu's wildness is not violence. It's seduction. The myth says they send a sacred temple prostitute. Her name is Shamhat. And yes, she's real in the sense that Sumer had priestesses devoted to the goddess Inanna who practiced ritual intimacy. Mesopotamian temples weren't just about chants and incense. They were, how shall we say, multifunctional. You follow Shamhat as she leaves Uruk, golden bangles clinking, wrapped in linen the color of sunrise. She doesn't seem nervous, more like amused. For 6 days and 7 nights, because of course it's that many, she camps by Enkidu's watering hole. And when he appears, Shamhat meets his stare with calm patience. She doesn't run. She doesn't speak. She waits. And Enkidu? He pauses, blinks. For the first time, he doesn't lunge, doesn't sniff, doesn't growl. He just kneels. The myth gets poetic here. They describe their joining as a breaking and a remaking. When Enkidu rises again, the animals no longer recognize him. They flee. His limbs are the same, but his soul has shifted. Civilization has claimed its price. You follow the two of them, Enkidu and Shamhat, back toward Uruk. His gait is slower now. He stumbles over his own thoughts. She teaches him to eat bread, to drink beer. His first beer goes about how you'd expect. Massive hiccup, followed by delighted confusion. This is joy, he says, foaming at the mouth. Meanwhile, back in Uruk, Gilgamesh is having more dreams. Symbols swirl through his sleep like ink in water. He sees axes and stars and a man who wrestles with him but never breaks. He wakes up sweaty and laughing. When Enkidu arrives, escorted by Shamhat and flanked by curious children throwing dates at him, the city buzzes like a struck harp string. The moment is coming. And oh, it comes hard. You're there when Gilgamesh and Enkidu finally meet, right at the gate of a newlywed's house. Because yes, Gilgamesh is on his way to exercise his royal rights again. Enkidu steps in front of him and says no. That's it. Just no. You could hear a quill drop. Gilgamesh snarls. Enkidu bares his teeth. And then they collide like two thunderstorms. The fight is chaotic, not elegant. No flashy swordplay or polite dueling stances. This is limbs, grunts, headlocks, a cracked pillar, 2 dislocated shoulders. Someone gets bit. Someone else might have been kissed. It's unclear. The citizens scatter like seeds in the wind. And then it stops. Gilgamesh pins Enkidu for the 3rd time and doesn't strike. He just stares. And Enkidu, pinned and breathing hard, smiles. They both laugh. It's not the end of the fight. It's the beginning of a friendship. Historians still argue whether the relationship between Gilgamesh and Enkidu was bromance or romance or something more fluid and spiritual, the way myth loves to tangle emotions. What's clear is this: they become inseparable. Brothers, twins of fate, the chaotic king and the wild man who tamed him. From here, the story gallops. You walk with them through the palace gardens, now choked with planning scrolls and travel gear. Gilgamesh has a new itch, one even Enkidu can't quite name. Let's make a name that echoes, he says. Let's kill something impossible. Enter the bull of heaven? Not yet. First, they need to deal with a cedar forest, and a demon who guards it. But that's for later. Tonight, you watch as the two men sit side by side on the palace steps, sweaty and bruised, sharing roasted barley and swapping ridiculous stories about hyena attacks and dream goats. Gilgamesh turns to Enkidu. You stopped me, he says. Enkidu shrugs. You needed stopping. And just like that, Uruk's king is no longer alone. The sun's just crawling out from behind the ziggurat when Gilgamesh bursts into the temple courtyard, shirt half-buttoned, shouting about a forest full of trees that touch the sky. Enkidu is behind him, chewing something that might be roasted locust and definitely looks like regret. He wants to kill Humbaba. Enkidu mutters, mouth full. You blink. Humbaba? You're not alone. The priests freeze mid-prayer. The head gardener drops a jar of date syrup. One of the scribes swears quietly in Akkadian. Humbaba, also known in older texts as Huowa, isn't your standard issue mythical monster. He's the guardian of the cedar forest, an ancient realm of green shadows and divine silence. Not exactly local. The forest is believed to be nestled far to the west, near the mountains of Lebanon, which, for you, means weeks of sand, snakes, and sandals full of grit. Gilgamesh, though, he's giddy. I'll carve our names into the trunks, he says, gesturing wildly. We'll be legends, songs, statues with abs. Enkidu sighs. Humbaba isn't a song. He's a curse. And here's your historical nugget. The cedar forest wasn't just a poetic metaphor. The Mesopotamians did import cedar wood from distant lands, Lebanon most famously. It was sacred, rare, and absurdly expensive. Used in temples, palaces, and anything meant to last longer than a single generation. To even think about raiding it was borderline sacrilege, which is exactly why Gilgamesh wants to do it. The temple elders warn him. The gods, they remind him, put Humbaba there. He's not just some ogre. He's the forest's heartbeat. He is the wilderness weaponized. Perfect, Gilgamesh says, clapping Enkidu on the back hard enough to launch a spleen. We leave tomorrow. The next few days are a blur of planning, fasting, sacrifice, and what appears to be some very nervous donkey packing. Gilgamesh insists on carrying an axe the size of a dining table. Enkidu sharpens his spear in total silence. And then they're gone. You ride with them into the dawn. The fields give way to scrub. The scrub becomes stones. Stones become foothills. And the wind gets weird, whistling through crevices like it's telling secrets you shouldn't hear. Gilgamesh chats the whole way, of course. Tells stories. Makes fun of Enkidu's hair. Tries to compose a battle song on the spot. It's not good. But as the mountains rise, so does a new note in his voice. Doubt. What if the stories were wrong, he says. What if Humbaba's not real? Enkidu doesn't answer right away. Finally, he says, he's real. I saw him once from far away. His face was made of entrails. You pause chewing your date cake. Like, literally entrails? Gilgamesh asks. Like a face only nightmares could love. And this, here comes your scholarly debate. Historians still argue over what Humbaba was supposed to represent. Some say he's a leftover god, a remnant of an older nature spirit absorbed into the newer pantheon. Others think he was symbolic of colonial fear, an embodiment of the wild, rich lands Mesopotamians wanted but couldn't fully control. Then there are fringe scholars who think Humbaba was a real historical enemy, a feared chieftain mythologized over time. Whatever the truth, you smell the forest before you see it. It's not like anything in Sumer. It doesn't just grow, it looms. Cedars taller than palaces, moss thick as carpets, air so rich it feels heavy in your lungs. You half expect the trees to lean down and whisper. Gilgamesh laughs too loudly, like someone trying to pretend he's not terrified. Enkidu kneels and presses his forehead to the soil. "We should turn back," he says quietly. "We can't," Gilgamesh replies. "Our names are already halfway home." They push forward. Nights in the forest are different. The stars vanish behind a lattice of branches. The animals don't make normal animal sounds. A lizard croaks like a flute. A beetle clicks like bone wind chimes. Enkidu doesn't sleep. Gilgamesh keeps having those dreams again. One night, Gilgamesh wakes up sweating, clutching Enkidu's arm. "There was fire," he whispers, "and a mountain fell on me, and a voice said, 'You will not return the same.'" Enkidu doesn't answer, just watches the trees shift. Then, finally, Humbaba. You don't see him so much as feel him, like thunder holding its breath, a stench of old blood and storm water. And then he steps out between two trees, as if the forest itself grew legs and decided to walk. His face is wrong, shifting. One moment it's a lion, then a vulture, then a skull, and maybe entrails. It hurts to look too long. Gilgamesh freezes. Humbaba doesn't roar. He smiles. It's worse than a roar. "You've come to die in poetry," he says. His voice sounds like cracking wood and a mother's disappointment. The battle that follows is not graceful. It's not heroic. It's desperate, clumsy, muddy. The cedar trees sway like they're watching. Gilgamesh swings wildly. Enkidu screams something primal and lunges with his spear. And then there's a moment, small, human, trembling. Humbaba falls to one knee. He begs. "I was set here by the gods," he says. "Spare me, and they will reward you." And now it's Enkidu who falters. "We should listen," he says. "He's not a monster. He's just doing his job." But Gilgamesh, he wants glory. And perhaps he hears the silence of Uruk calling back through time. The people who mocked him, the scribes who doubted him, the priests who tried to cage him. He wants their praise. He lifts the axe, and Enkidu helps him swing. Humbaba falls, and in that moment, the forest sighs. Not in relief, in warning. Here's a strange little tidbit to chew on. In some lesser-known versions of the myth, Humbaba curses them both before he dies. Not with words, just a look, a knowing look, like someone who sees the ending before the first act is done. The two heroes sit in the clearing afterward, gasping, stained, and victorious. Gilgamesh laughs. Enkidu doesn't. You feel it too, the edge of something sour, like you've won the game but lost the rules. They chop down the finest cedar, carve a gate for Uruk, strap it to donkeys. They head home, but the sky above them is quiet now. Too quiet. You return to Uruk with the dust of the cedar forest still clinging to your boots. The city walls shimmer like honey in the morning light, the ziggurat casting its long, protective shadow across the streets. People gather in droves, cheering, waving palm fronds, throwing roasted chickpeas like they're confetti. You and your two weary heroes march in like living statues. Gilgamesh, he's practically glowing, hair tousled, cloak ragged, cheeks sunburned. He looks like every temple carving brought to life. The cedar gate they've dragged back is massive, polished, divine. He plants it at the city's threshold like a trophy stabbed into the earth. Enkidu doesn't smile, not even once. And here's your mainstream historical detail to set the scene. Ancient Mesopotamian cities like Uruk didn't just value military might. They worshipped order. Kings were supposed to be shepherds of civilization, keepers of grain stores, builders of walls, and yes, commissioners of epic public art. A gate carved from sacred cedar? That's political poetry. It says, "My rule extends beyond this land. Even the gods watch what I build." So on the surface, all is perfect. But then the goddess arrives. You feel her before you see her. The breeze shifts. Pigeons scatter. The priests drop their incense burners mid-chant. Then she walks into the palace courtyard like it belongs to her, because it does. Inanna, also known as Ishtar, goddess of love, war, and everything sharp between. Perfumed in danger, veiled in starlight, surrounded by a cloud of music that seems to play only for her. She doesn't bother with flowery introductions. "I want you," she tells Gilgamesh, not in a "you're cute" sort of way, more like a divine summons, cosmic claim. Gilgamesh, being Gilgamesh, does the unthinkable. He says no, and then keeps talking. He lists her lovers, all the mortal men she's ruined, the shepherd who turned into a wolf, the bird who lost his wings, the gardener swallowed by thorns. It's petty, it's mean, it's historic. Even Enkidu winces. Ishtar doesn't respond. She doesn't need to. She simply turns on her heel and ascends to the heavens. She goes straight to her father, Anu, sky god, celestial CEO, and demands a revenge gift. The bull of heaven. Here comes your scholarly debate moment. Was the bull of heaven a literal creature in the myth? A divine symbol of famine? Or maybe even a coded reference to an astronomical event like Taurus rising ominously over the city? Historians bicker like schoolchildren about it. But to the people of Uruk, it didn't matter. Because the next morning, the earth opens. The bull of heaven thunders out. You feel it before you see it. Again, the same stomach drop pressure as when Humbaba appeared, but heavier, hungrier. His hoofs crack the cobblestones like pottery. Each snort releases a gust of rot and ozone. Its eyes glow like fire in a forge. And when it bellows, the river Tigris flinches. People flee. Walls buckle. The palace guard throws down their spears and climbs trees they know won't hold their weight. Gilgamesh grins. Finally, he says, a proper challenge. You, meanwhile, seriously consider hiding behind the nearest fruit cart. The bull charges. Gilgamesh barely dodges. Its horns carve a sculpture out of the temple steps. Enkidu shouts something unintelligible and leaps onto its back. It bucks, kicking up a cloud of sand and screaming pigeons. For a second, just a flicker, you see them both laughing. These two absurd men, dancing on the edge of divinity, caught in a cosmic tantrum. And then they kill it. Just like that, Gilgamesh lands the final blow, but Enkidu holds it down. They slice its throat, and the beast's blood floods the square. Uruk cheers, but it sounds thinner than before, like maybe they're not sure this was the right thing. Gilgamesh hacks off the bull's thigh and throws it in the direction of Ishtar, who has returned to watch from the temple balcony. "Dinner's on me," he calls, which might be the most dangerous sentence ever uttered by a mortal. Ishtar shrieks, not out of pain, out of rage. Cosmic, divine, apocalyptic rage. And the gods? They're not laughing anymore. They gather in the darkness behind the stars. They mutter, they vote, and they reach a decision. Someone has to pay. Now here's a quirky tidbit from fringe tablets rarely included in the main versions. Some versions say the gods argue about killing both heroes. But one god, possibly Shamash, god of the sun and occasional plot softener, intervenes. Not both, he says. Not yet. So they choose Enkidu, the one who was made to balance, the one who was never meant to stay. The first sign comes in a dream. Enkidu wakes up gasping, sweat-drenched, eyes wide. He tells Gilgamesh about it. A man made of shadows dragged him down into a house with no light, where dust is food and silence is law, where the kings of old sit on thrones of cobwebs and never speak. Am I dying? Enkidu asks. Gilgamesh laughs too quickly. Dreams aren't real, he says, but the fever comes. It starts in his fingertips, then his eyes. His voice goes hoarse. His limbs grow heavy. Shamhat visits. So do the priests. So does Nin's son. No one can help. You sit by his side. Watch the color drain from his lips. Watch Gilgamesh pace the palace like a trapped lion. It's not fair. He was the better one. The one who didn't ask for glory. The one who never wanted to be remembered. And still, the gods take him. It's not heroic. It's not poetic. It just is. Enkidu dies. Gilgamesh weeps. The kind of weeping that shakes architecture. He curses the gods. Curses the cedar forest. Curses the bull. Curses death itself. And now he's truly alone. The city throws a funeral so grand it makes the rivers weep. They bury Enkidu with gold, spices, scrolls, and regrets. The people sing, but not loudly. And you feel something shift. This isn't a myth anymore. It's a warning. You don't sleep the night after Enkidu's funeral. The city is too quiet. Even the cicadas seem to pause out of respect, or maybe fear. Gilgamesh doesn't sleep either. He stands on the city wall until dawn, staring into the distance like something out there might answer him. When the sun rises, he's already gone. No fanfare, no speech, no armor, just a cloak, a walking stick, and a wild look in his eyes. You follow, of course. He heads east, past the gardens of Uruk, where the pomegranate trees have started to wilt, past the goat herders' trails, past the last well where you could have turned back. Gilgamesh says nothing, but you can hear it in his breath, the quiet chant over and over. Enkidu is gone, Enkidu is gone, Enkidu is gone. What's he looking for? Not revenge, not another monster to wrestle. No, this time he's after something worse. Immortality. He's heard rumors, whispers about a man who never died, a man who survived the Great Flood, the first and last human granted eternal life by the gods. Utnapishtim, mainstream fact break. The Mesopotamian flood myth, recorded in the Epic of Gilgamesh, is one of the oldest written flood stories in human history, predating even parts of the biblical account. Scholars agree that these ancient tablets may have influenced everything from Noah's Ark to Plato's Atlantis. Gilgamesh doesn't care about stories. He wants proof. So you walk. For days, maybe weeks. Time gets soft at the edges. You pass ruined temples swallowed by sand. Skeletons of cities no one remembers. Herds of gazelle that watch silently from the hills. And then rocks, mountains like fangs, the edge of the known world. Some say this is Mashu, the twin-peaked gateway to the heavens. Others say it's just where the world frays into dreams. All you know is it's guarded. Two scorpion men stand at the entrance to a cave so dark it seems to suck in sound. They're taller than towers, faces carved from stone, tails twitching lazily like they haven't stung anything in far too long. They blink at Gilgamesh. "You're mortal," one growls. "You can't pass." Gilgamesh does not flinch. "I am Gilgamesh of Uruk," he says. "I killed Humbaba. I defeated the bull of heaven. I seek Utnapishtim." "You smell like fear," the other murmurs. "I buried my brother," he replies. "There is nothing left to fear." The scorpion men glance at each other. Then they open the gate. This is where you seriously question your life choices. The tunnel is pitch black. Not just night pre-night, the kind of dark where you forget your own shape. You cling to Gilgamesh's voice as he chants to keep the shadows back. 10 leagues, 20. You stop counting. Eventually, after what feels like an entire life lived underground, you see light. A garden impossible, glittering, surreal. Trees with jewels instead of fruit. Crystals growing like mushrooms. Vines of precious metal. It's beautiful, and not remotely helpful. You meet a goddess here, Siduri, tavern keeper of the gods. Because yes, even divine beings need a good drink sometimes. Her bar is carved into the edge of the world. The ocean beyond it churns with stars. She pours you both something dark and sweet, and tells Gilgamesh to give up. "No one escapes death," she says, polishing a goblet. "Even the gods can't undo what's written in the clay." Gilgamesh slams the cup down. "I must know," he says. "This is your quirky tidbit." Siduri is possibly the oldest recorded female barkeep in literature. She's also the voice of reason in a world of madness. A divine therapist with ale. She tries to explain to Gilgamesh that the point of life is living, not running from death. Grow your garden, bake your bread, love your children. He thanks her by demanding the ferry route to Utnapishtim. She sighs, points to the sea. You meet Urshanabi next. He's a boatman, possibly a god, possibly cursed. He doesn't talk much, but he agrees to take you after Gilgamesh destroys the sacred stone men that power his boat, which is like showing up for an Uber and slashing its tires. So you cut down 100 poles. Use them one by one to push across the waters of death. The sea here is oil black, silent. Nothing swims in it, not even time. You finally reach the other shore. And there he is, Utnapishtim. He looks disappointing. No glowing eyes, no cosmic aura. Just an old man in a simple robe, sitting outside a mud brick house, feeding a very confused goat. Gilgamesh falls to his knees. Tell me how to escape death. Utnapishtim sighs and tells a story. Here's your scholarly debate highlight. The flood myth Utnapishtim tells contains eerie similarities to the biblical story of Noah. Divine warning, a massive boat, pairs of animals, and a final resting place on a mountain. But Utnapishtim's version is older, clay tablet old. He was a mortal like you, warned by the god Ea, built a massive ark, survived the deluge. The gods, impressed or maybe just exhausted, granted him and his wife eternal life. But, he says, that was a one-time deal. We were the exception, not the rule. Gilgamesh clenches his fists. There must be a test, a challenge. Utnapishtim squints. Fine, he says. Stay awake for 7 days. Simple, right? Except within minutes, Gilgamesh is snoring. Utnapishtim's wife bakes a loaf of bread beside him for each day he sleeps. By day 7, you have a tidy row of moldy evidence. When Gilgamesh finally wakes, he insists he only dozed off. Utnapishtim just gestures at the green fuzz growing on yesterday's loaf. Defeated, Gilgamesh prepares to leave. But the wife, she takes pity. Tell him about the plant, she whispers. Ah yes, the secret, the last fragile hope. A thorny, glowing herb that grows at the bottom of the cosmic ocean. Can restore youth, maybe even stop death. Gilgamesh dives, retrieves it, clutches it like a newborn. Finally, he has it. He decides not to eat it. He wants to take it back to Uruk. Test it on someone old first. See if it works. You make it all the way to a quiet spring near the edge of the desert. Gilgamesh sets the plant beside him while he bathes. And then, a snake slithers by, eats the plant, sheds its skin, slithers away. Gilgamesh doesn't scream, doesn't curse. He just sits there, soaking wet, holding the empty spot where the plant used to be, and laughs. Not a happy laugh, not a mad one either. Just the sound of someone finally realizing the joke's on them. You walk back to Uruk. Slower this time. The desert doesn't feel so empty anymore. The rivers sparkle like they know something you don't. Even the city gates seem to sigh with relief when you return. Gilgamesh climbs the walls, looks out, and says almost to himself, "This at least will last." He means the city. He means the people. He means you. You're back in Uruk. But something's shifted. The air tastes different. Gilgamesh walks the streets not like a king returning from glory, but like someone waking from a strange and bittersweet dream. He touches the city walls gently, like he's feeling their heartbeat. The bricks are warm in the afternoon sun. Children run by, laughing. The markets clatter with noise and haggling. And for the first time, he really sees it. This is what will outlive him. You follow as he walks, past the temple courtyards where priests chant like clockwork, past scribes bent over their clay tablets, murmuring spells or recording barley harvests, past the house where Enkidu once sat, feet up, tossing dates into his mouth and declaring them not bad, but a little dry. Gilgamesh doesn't say much these days. He listens more, watches, smiles sometimes. That smile you make when something hurts but you've made peace with it. That doesn't last long. Because one morning, there's a shout at the gate. A merchant caravan has arrived from distant lands, Akkad, maybe even Elam. They've brought perfumes, ivory, strange textiles, and stories. One tale in particular makes its way through the crowd and into Gilgamesh's ears like a spark into dry brushwood. A bull the size of a mountain, horns like obsidian, eyes like burning coals. It's been seen wandering near the ruins at Kish. You freeze. Gilgamesh looks at you. You think it's the bull of heaven? He asks. Didn't we kill that one? You reply. He shrugs. Maybe they sent another. You consider the odds. One cosmic bovine was enough, thanks. But Gilgamesh has that look again, the half-smirk of someone who knows he shouldn't chase ghosts, but still brings a lasso. This is where the myth turns meta, because whether or not the bull is real doesn't actually matter. What matters is that people believe it's real again. And Gilgamesh? He can't resist a legend. Mainstream fact check. There's no record of a second bullfight in the Epic of Gilgamesh, but alternate tablets, fragmentary traditions, and oral retellings from later Babylonian sources hint at a resurgence of the bull, or at least its mythic cousins. One version even names a white bull of the western wind, described as louder than drums and swift as dust devils. Historians still argue whether this was a true sequel, a symbolic echo, or fanfiction before fanfiction was cool. So Gilgamesh does what Gilgamesh does best. He straps on his armor, still scuffed from Humbaba's forest, polishes his axe, tightens his sandals, and you, of course, are right behind him, because you've come this far, and hey, maybe this one won't end with being flung into a barley field. The trail to Kish is rough. Desert wind howls like old gods murmuring secrets. The sky yawns above you, cloudless, relentless. You pass shattered ziggurats, once proud and holy, now sun-bleached skeletons. The roads are cracked like old skin, and then hoofprints, enormous, deep, still steaming in the cool dawn air. Gilgamesh kneels beside one. Fresh, he says. You nod and suppress a sigh. Of course it is. You find it not long after. Not in some epic showdown arena. Not framed by lightning and chanting crowds. No, the bull stands in a dried-up canal, chewing absently on a pomegranate tree. It is massive, white, dappled with scars. Its horns are chipped at the tips like broken moonlight. It watches you as if you're an odd kind of wind. Gilgamesh steps forward and stops. He doesn't charge. He doesn't roar. He just looks and slowly, reverently kneels. The bull doesn't flinch, just flicks its tail and lowers its head, acknowledging something ancient and mutual. This is your quirky moment. In some Mesopotamian traditions, sacred bulls weren't just monsters. They were also messengers, servants of the divine, symbols of time, fertility, and transformation. Some even say each great king would face one, not to slay, but to understand. And maybe, just maybe, Gilgamesh understands now. He doesn't fight it. He walks away. You don't speak until sunset. The stars are just starting to scatter across the sky when Gilgamesh finally breaks the silence. I used to think the gods were cruel, he says, that they gave us greatness only to take it back. But maybe they just want us to notice. You look at him. Notice what? He gestures at the desert, the sky, the sliver of moon. This, he says, the whole mess of it. The walk back to Uruk feels like the closing act of a long, strange song. You pass shepherds singing to their goats, drunk priests who offer you incense for no reason, and a pair of foxes dancing in a dust cloud. Gilgamesh is quiet again, but this time it feels like contentment. You make camp one night near the river. The stars blink sleepily above, and Gilgamesh tells you something unexpected. I've started carving, he says. You blink. Carving. Stone tablets, he explains. My story. Yours too. You sit up. Wait. You're writing this all down? He nods. People forget fast. I want them to remember slower. And this, dear traveler, is your historical kicker. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the oldest known epic poem in human history. Written in cuneiform on clay tablets over 4,000 years ago, it was preserved through floods, wars, and even the fall of entire empires. We only rediscovered it in the 19th century, buried in the ruins of Nineveh. Pieces still turn up, whispering the story anew. Historians still argue whether Gilgamesh was a real king, a mythic hero, or both. But the clay remembers him, and maybe that's enough. Back in Uruk, the scribes gather as Gilgamesh dictates. They scratch each syllable into soft, wet clay, careful not to miss a word. You hear him say things you lived, and things you didn't. Was that really what happened? You ask later, eyebrow raised. He winks. It is now. You sit on the wall again that night, just like before. But this time, Gilgamesh doesn't look out toward the unknown. He looks inward, at the city he built, at the people in it, at the soft pulse of life. You know, he says, maybe death's not the end. You tilt your head. What is it, then? He smiles faintly. Just the next turn of the wheel. Gilgamesh is older now. You can see it in his face. The way the lines deepen around his eyes. How his beard has thickened, shot through with glints of silver that catch the late afternoon sun. But he wears it well, like a tapestry woven by time itself. Kings don't wrinkle. They gain contour. Uruk is thriving. The streets hum like a living organism. Fruit vendors shouting over donkey carts. Musicians tuning lyres in alleyways. Potters kicking wheels in dusty workshops. And Gilgamesh? He's in no hurry. He walks slowly, deliberately, like he's tasting every moment for the first time. No more sprints toward immortality. But you know that look in his eyes. He's not done yet. Not quite. Have you heard of Utnapishtim? He asks one morning, unprompted, while watching a turtle wriggle its way into the Euphrates. Who? You ask suspiciously. No one just brings up names like Utnapishtim casually. Old man, Gilgamesh says. Lives beyond the mountains. Built a boat. Survived a great flood. The gods granted him eternal life. You narrow your eyes. So now we're chasing the Mesopotamian Noah? He grins. Why not? This, dear listener, is your mainstream history moment. Utnapishtim is a kind of ancient Near Eastern Noah. His tale appears on Tablet 11 of the Epic of Gilgamesh and mirrors the biblical flood story closely. Ark, animals, rain, divine warning. Scholars believe both stories may descend from even older Sumerian flood myths, possibly rooted in real events like a massive river flood around 2900 BCE. You've done forests. You've faced bulls. You've stared down death. But chasing a man who supposedly outlived time? That's new. You travel light. Some water skins, a few salted dates, a worn map etched into goatskin. The journey takes you beyond the familiar river valleys and up into dry hills, where wind whistles like a lonely flute through rock arches. At night, the stars seem closer. They stare down like silent judges. Days stretch, nights blur, and Gilgamesh grows quiet again. Not the brooding silence of grief, but the thoughtful hush of someone processing a new kind of longing. I don't want to be a god, he admits over a smoky campfire. I just don't want to vanish. You nod. Vanishing is overrated. He smiles. Besides, someone has to write my ending. Eventually, you reach the waters of death. Not metaphorical ones, unfortunately. A swampy, brackish, mosquito-infested marsh that would make even the bravest Babylonian rethink their life choices. Legend says anyone who touches these waters dies instantly. Even swimming near them is frowned upon. Gilgamesh stands at the edge, boots sinking in the muck, and laughs. Well, he says, that complicates things. This is where things get delightfully weird. A man appears, shrouded, silent, eyes like dust. Urshanabi, Gilgamesh says. The boatman. Fringe fact time. Urshanabi is a figure of curious speculation among scholars. Some say he's a demigod. Others claim he's Death's ferryman. And a few delightfully offbeat theories suggest he was based on real marshland guides who navigated Mesopotamia's ancient reed boat highways. Either way, he offers you passage. But there's a catch. You'll need to cut hundreds of punting poles, fresh wood only, and you must never touch the water directly. It's a test of patience, of craftsmanship, of discipline. You and Gilgamesh spend days harvesting reeds, drying them over campfires, lashing them with twisted flax. Urshanabi says little, just watches. By the time the boat launches, your hands are blistered and Gilgamesh has stopped complaining. You push off at dawn and drift. The water is still, too still, like glass poured over the bones of the world. Nothing stirs, no birds, no fish, just the steady thunk of poles in the silt and the slow creak of reed on reed. Then land, a distant shape, a hut, low to the ground, ringed by unfamiliar trees. Smoke curls from its roof like a whisper, and there, standing in the doorway, arms folded, is a man who looks both impossibly old and annoyingly alert. Utnapishtim, Gilgamesh breathes. You don't expect the man to sigh, but he does. Another one? And now the myth folds in on itself. Gilgamesh pleads. He recounts his journey. Enkidu, Humbaba, the bull, the long walk through grief and glory. Utnapishtim listens, patient, resigned. And then, with the weariness of someone who's had to explain the same story to far too many seekers, he tells his tale. A storm, sent by the gods. A divine warning. A boat hastily built. The animals 2 by 2. The deluge. The silence afterward. The mountain where he landed. The gods' regret. The gift of eternal life. Gilgamesh leans forward. How do I get that? Utnapishtim chuckles softly. You don't. You freeze. Gilgamesh doesn't. There must be something. Utnapishtim sighs. All right, stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights. Prove your endurance. Then maybe I'll reconsider. Gilgamesh agrees instantly. Fails within minutes. Like embarrassingly fast. You don't blame him. The hut is warm, the marsh is quiet, and let's face it, you're ready for a nap, too. When he wakes, Utnapishtim just raises an eyebrow. Immortality isn't for the restless. But because every good quest has a parting gift, Utnapishtim relents slightly. He offers Gilgamesh one final chance. There is a plant, he says, deep beneath the sea. It restores youth. And once again, you're off. This time, Gilgamesh ties stones to his feet and dives into the depths. The water is thick, ancient, heavy. And there, near the bottom, he finds it. A glowing, thorny vine, almost humming. He returns to the surface triumphantly, clutching it like a holy grail. You both laugh. You both cry. You both eat suspiciously underripe figs to celebrate. On the way back, Gilgamesh says he'll share the plant with the elders of Uruk first. Let them grow young again. Let the city thrive. You sleep that night under the stars, the plant nestled safely beside your camp. And in the morning, it's gone. A serpent has slithered through your camp and made a snack of destiny. You both stare at the drag marks. Gilgamesh doesn't scream. He just stares. And then, he laughs. A deep, raw, belly laugh. Of course, he says. Of course it ends like that. This is your open debate moment. Historians still argue whether the snake scene is symbolic, a cautionary parable about the inevitability of death, or an ancient version of cosmic trolling. Some scholars even believe it inspired later motifs of snakes and eternal life, like the shedding of skin as rebirth. Either way, the message is clear. There are no shortcuts. Gilgamesh doesn't speak much on the journey home, but when the walls of Uruk rise into view again, familiar, proud, eternal, he smiles. And for the first time in a long time, he doesn't look past them. He looks at them, at what he built, at what will remain, at what matters. You walk the last stretch back into Uruk in silence. The dust clings to your legs, your tunic smells like every kind of wet leaf and burning reed you've encountered over the past few weeks, and Gilgamesh, who once returned to the city dragging the head of a monster, is cradling absolutely nothing. No sacred plant, no immortal fruit, no relic, no revelation, no cosmic cheat code. Just dirt under his nails, and a strange, unshakable peace. He stops right where the road becomes city, where worn stone gives way to carved wall, places a hand on it again, same way he did that day after Enkidu died. Only this time, he presses his forehead to it too. He murmurs something. You think it might be thanks. Uruk hasn't changed much in your absence. That's the point, maybe. Grain still flows like golden rivers through the markets. Scribes still complain that clay cracks too fast. Kids still sneak into sacred courtyards to dare each other to kiss temple statues. And the king's throne still waits. But Gilgamesh doesn't sit. He paces instead. For hours. Through the streets, the alleys, the workshops. Talking to people. Listening. Asking questions like, what are you working on? What do you want to leave behind? He stands beside weavers and measures fabric with his own calloused fingers. Sits with masons and asks about mortar ratios. Even helps a cook roast barley into that strange half-puff state that's perfect for early morning porridge. And then, he commissions something. Not a statue. Not a ziggurat. Not even a new wall. A library. You blink. A what? A house for words. he says. Tablets, songs, recipes, dreams, even the ones that don't make sense yet. Mainstream history moment. Mesopotamia is credited with creating one of the world's earliest libraries. The famed library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh wouldn't come for centuries. But even in Uruk, clay tablets were collected, sorted, and cataloged with surprising care. Cuneiform wasn't just a tool, it was an act of memory. And Gilgamesh? He wants memory to matter. You help. Of course you help. You ferry tablets from old storerooms. You sit with wide-eyed scribes as they carve fresh ones. You even help etch a copy of your own journey. Yes, the one you're still living through. It's a weird meta moment. Very self-aware. He calls it he who saw the deep. You raise an eyebrow. It's about you, he says. Kind of. The library takes shape in the courtyard behind the Temple of Inanna. Not a massive structure, just a square of sun-dried brick and palm beams. But it smells of incense and ink and warm clay. Feels permanent. One afternoon, as the final tablet shelf is raised, Gilgamesh calls for the city's youth. Dozens gather. Teenagers with sandals too big, braids half done, eyes still full of that dangerous kind of wonder. He tells them stories of forests that watch you, of bulls that cry fire, of men made from dust and dreams, and finally of a plant that could make you young again. If only snakes didn't get hungry too. They laugh, but their eyes shine, and then he gestures to the tablets. These, he says, are for when your stories begin. He steps back, and they step forward. You sit beside him later, as dusk filters in like spilled wine across the city. The rooftops shimmer orange. The air smells of roasted onions and river wind. And Gilgamesh looks lighter, not fixed, not healed, just settled. Still want to live forever? You ask. He chuckles. Depends on the day. Pause. But I think I found a better plan. You glance at the tablets stacked behind him. Immortality through footnotes? He shrugs. You said it, not me. Here's your fringe fact. Some ancient texts refer to a king of the four quarters who built a temple not for the gods, but for stories. It's unclear whether this refers to Gilgamesh or someone else entirely, but it aligns with the mythic arc. Warrior becomes seeker becomes scribe. And what a weird arc it is. You've watched him age without fading. You've watched him mourn without breaking. You've watched him fight, fail, rise, fall, and write it all down. Not to boast, but to be remembered. One evening, just as the sun vanishes behind the temple spires, he hands you something. A small clay tablet. Your name is on it. You blink. What's this? He smirks. Your side of the story. You scan it. There's a line about your sarcasm. A few verses about the time you nearly got eaten by a very territorial ibex. And a poem, short, uneven, about how you kept walking even when your feet bled. It's oddly beautiful. You suddenly can't speak. And Gilgamesh, who once roared into the heavens, who once wrestled beasts without blinking, just pats your shoulder. You were there, he says. That matters. That night he hosts a feast. Not for conquest. Not for a new temple or a completed wall. Just for the city. Bread flows like water. Dates are flung at innocent passersby. Drummers and dancers blur into a blur of sound. Children climb onto statues they really shouldn't climb. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Gilgamesh dances. Yes, dances. Badly. You try not to laugh. You fail. And when the fire dies down and the crowd fades, he stays behind to sweep the courtyard with an old reed broom. You join him. Of course you do. Because this isn't about gods anymore. It's about a king who learned that the best way to defy death is to build something that outlives your bones. And he's doing just that. One tablet, one story, one dusty courtyard at a time. Some nights you lie beneath Uruk stars. Those same pale pinpricks that watched Enkidu be born, watched Humbaba fall, watched a snake slither off with the prize, and wonder if this is what peace feels like. Not fireworks, not hallelujahs, just breath. Even Gilgamesh has settled into it. Well, mostly. He still wakes early, sharp as ever. Trains with the younger guards, although now he grumbles about his knees. He's traded war chants for building songs, and his war axe for a measuring rod. Occasionally, you catch him staring at the sky like he's waiting for someone or something to answer a question he never asked aloud. But mostly, he's here, present. And then, one morning, a visitor arrives, a scribe from far to the east. Young, wide-eyed, breathless. He's heard rumors, wild ones, about a king who wrestled death and won, who built a house of memory, who may or may not be part god. Gilgamesh smirks when he hears this. Mostly mortal now, he mutters. The scribe asks if he may copy the tablets, translate them into his language, take them back to his own city. Gilgamesh nods. Stories are meant to walk, he says, even if I don't anymore. And with that, something stirs, like the past shifting its weight. Remember that mainstream history bit about Mesopotamian libraries? Here's the cooler part. Some fragments of the Epic of Gilgamesh have been found thousands of miles from where they were written, buried in other cities, other empires, whispered across tongues and centuries, carried by hands that never knew Uruk, but still kept its king alive. You walk past the library that evening. The air is cool. Someone left an oil lamp burning low inside. You can just make out the shadows of tablets on their shelves, rows upon rows of baked clay time machines. And you realize something. Gilgamesh didn't just record his legacy. He made it mobile. One day, a storm rolls in from the west. Rain lashes the rooftops. Mud floods the streets. People scramble for shelter. And Gilgamesh, he's up on the city wall again. You join him, soaked to the bone. Checking for leaks? You joke. Just wanted to see the city glow in the rain, he replies. Uruk shines. Wet stone, lamplight, the shimmer of puddles turning alleys into little golden rivers. I used to think this city was mine, he says. You raise an eyebrow. Still kind of do, he adds, grinning. Then he turns serious. But it's more than mine now. It belongs to stories. To kids who'll one day wonder if the bull of heaven really scorched the stars. To scholars who'll debate whether Humbaba was a metaphor. To listeners, maybe even dreamers like you, curled under blankets centuries later, wondering if giants once roamed the cedar forests of old. Here's your final quirky fact. In some fringe interpretations, Gilgamesh wasn't just a king, he was an archetype, a blueprint. His journey was echoed in later heroes like Heracles, Odysseus, and even figures in modern pop culture. A flawed warrior chasing something eternal, only to discover that meaning lives in the ordinary, in bread shared, in walls mended, in tablets that outlast storms. And you were part of that story, the sarcastic shadow at his side, the skeptic, the friend. One night, Gilgamesh gives you one last thing, a key. It's carved from lapis lazuli, heavy, cool to the touch. For the library, he says. You blink. You're giving me the keys to immortality? He laughs. No, just to the room where immortality is filed under S, for stories people won't stop retelling. He walks away, and you, wet, windblown, not quite ready to say goodbye, slip into the library once more. You run your fingers along the tablet that bears your name. The clay's warm, feels like home, and you wonder if someone found this thousands of years from now, if they read the verses, would they understand who you were? Would they picture you sprinting from a dust storm, laughing at Gilgamesh's awful dancing, peeling roasted dates while arguing about whether snakes deserve immortality? Maybe that's enough, because you didn't defeat death, but you did outwalk it. And maybe, just maybe, that's what Gilgamesh was trying to show you all along. That being remembered isn't about living forever. It's about living well, and letting the echoes do the rest. Wind down begins now. The storm has passed. The streets gleam under moonlight, and somewhere behind you, a tablet's wet clay finishes drying. Another line locked into memory. You step quietly back through the alleys of Uruk, past half-sung lullabies, past temple bells still humming from the evening rites, past a baker already shaping the dough that will become tomorrow's bread. The city breathes, and you, wrapped in shadows and soft echoes, finally do too. No monsters to chase, no gods to challenge, just the memory of what you've seen and the quiet gift of being part of it. You close the library door behind you, key still in your palm. Let the stones settle. Let the wind hush. Somewhere, a snake curls beneath a tree, content. Somewhere else, a cedar grove slowly regrows. And here, in the deep cradle of history, a story ends, just softly enough to begin again. Sleep now. You've walked a long way, and the stories will wait.
Thank you.